want to come and sit next to me? The people testifying was at the... Always happy to have the committee surrounding safety in numbers, right? So 7 o'clock, thank you all for coming. Motion to call the meeting to order.
Second.
All in favor?
Which way was it going over here?
Good, we are in session. The minutes for the last meeting have yet to be distributed, so we will defer acceptance of the minutes of the September 11th meeting and proceed directly to discussion of the a presentation of the Chapter 13. Rick, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I guess I did send out material this afternoon.
Right.
I don't know whether the committee had a chance to, I don't know whether the committee's had a chance to see that material.
Everything that I sent, they got. I don't know if everybody's had time to read it, though.
Yeah, right, that's, I fully understand that.
Okay.
I did
So,
send
but
out-
I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk, and after that, I will give you a 30-second warning, and then you'll be invited to end, because we have a lot to cover, and nobody wants to stay later than necessary.
Frankly, one of the reasons I came tonight was I was told that, in fact, there would be a discussion. And am I the only one on the agenda to talk about Chapter 13?
From your perspective, yes. At this point, the Personnel Board Chair is coming, but he said he was going to be here at 7:15, so you have the floor.
How about if I would like to wait till after the Personnel Board, because they met last night, and I don't know the outcome of their meeting.
I don't either, but why don't you start since you're here?
I'm simply here to make sure you receive all the materials, and there's a chart here. This is a chart that was asked for by the other night, which is on the personnel boards. So I don't have it electronically, I have it in paper. Everything else you received today was in electronic fashion. And again, the red line version shows you the changes that were made to the bylaw. It shows you what was added and what was excluded. Also, the select person, Katie Conlon, sent out a document today, which is about 4 pages long, that I think did an excellent description of the history of the article and the changes that were made and what's intended. So I think what's important here is to focus on, what the changes are and understand that with the exception of this issue of the approving the appointment, which is a process appointment, that's a process that's been going on. It's not a qualitative review, it's a process review. So did the process take place? With the exception of that shift from the Personnel Board to the Town Administrator, I haven't heard nor have received information on their other, whatever other changes they're not happy with. So we've heard all the discussion has been focused on whether the Town Administrator or the Personnel Board should make that process approval. I don't know from the article that they've had whether they're opposed to increasing their oversight, which ironically, the Personnel Board was in here the other night talking about oversight. That is not reduced in the proposed bylaw. In fact, it's increased. It's expanded. So the article itself is an expanded version of.
Maybe you can do a little bit of education for those of us who don't know. What was the genesis of the desire to change?
The desire to change was, first of all, I sent out also today the Department of Revenue report. And on pages 8 and 9 of the Department of Revenue report, it's cited, for example, to strengthen the town administrator, and we did that. The town approved that. The legislature approved that. We've hired the strong town administrator. So the genesis was on that page 8 and 9 of the Department of Revenue report that was sent out to you today. That explains that also the employment of an assistant town administrator for HR, in their recommendation, eliminated the need for a personnel board. Our committee did not agree with that recommendation. Our committee changed the scope, and in the chart you'll see that towns have adopted different strategies with advisory roles and oversight roles, and that's the direction we went in. So that was the original genesis back in 2013 when that report came out. So we also had the selectmen came in and asked us to look at that issue as well in the time period that we were preparing the strong town administrator. So
On Monday, I don't know if it was you, but someone had mentioned that Brookline was the framework for the suggested changes, well, for our original and the suggested changes. Having pulled that and looked at it, the Brookline bylaws have a cooperative relationship between the town administrators, HR, personnel, and the personnel board. They actually attend each other's meetings. And I find that absent from ours, and I was wondering why.
yeah, and I would disagree with you that it's absent, because in fact the assistant town administrator has served as staff to the personnel board and would continue to serve as staff to the personnel board. So there's a long history of the Selectman's office, and this room here, I mentioned the other night, Carol Blute, she was in fact staff to the Personnel Board.
Prior to that was Anne Marie Fagan, or after that was Anne Marie
Marie
Fagan.
Fagan,
So the HR, whatever HR we've had in the town has always been an integral part of the personnel board.
Okay.
And as part of this proposed bylaw, the requests by the Personnel Board for information and all their meetings would continue to be staffed by the Assistant Town Administrator. So that's incorporated in there. They have the opportunity to request information on the reports that were discussed the other night, such as employment opportunity, equal employment opportunity. All of that would be provided by the Selectman's office still. The Personnel Board does not have funding for any staff, and this bylaw is intending to continue that working relationship on a cooperative basis.
So actually, when you look at the Brookline, it is identical to what the article is. I mean, it may not be written
Unfortunately,
as.
not the drafting.
The drafting
It's
maybe
really
not.
hard to see where that is. It's-
But if you read the summary, you know, it is, if you look at the Brookline, the functions, to provide general recommendations, human resource program, to adjudicate grievances and complaints arising of this bylaw, to adjudicate grievances arising under town labor contracts as provided, to review and approve staffing levels established, which is
The
which-
grievance process doesn't have at least the way that I read it, the personnel board isn't mentioned at all in the dispute resolution section of the bylaw that we were circulated.
You're correct, and the
That-
dispute resolution process that we substituted, and by the way, the suggestion to change the word grievance in the process was made by the Personnel Board at a joint meeting. So we certainly have incorporated changes in there, but in terms of the number of employees, they would not be going to the Personnel Board, it would be through the process you see there with the town administrator or the department head.
5 minutes allotted for this has expired. Thank you. Is there any, before we finish, is there any more questions specifically on this subject?
I had a quick question. The move from 3 to 5 selectmen, is there a timetable for that?
Well, that's
Yes.
on the ballot for next spring.
Okay, all right, I
The
did.
first, it's been approved by the town, and so next spring's ballot will contain, you know, three slots.
Three slots, right.
Just as I was reading, I noticed in at least one of the section Bs that it says, all new hires and promotions as occur. The personnel board may review, advise, and/or report to the town administrator. Is there going to be a version where it says shall review, advise, rather than may?
Well, we made it discretionary on their part. We weren't trying to force them to do that, so it was, discretionary was the intent.
But does that also mean that the town administrator does not have to seek out or adhere or?
He needs to follow their
Do anything
rules,
to-
so in the opening paragraph, we left in there, the personnel board sets the rules and procedures, so he's required to follow those rules and procedures. And they can request information to determine if he's following the rules they've established. The staff, the assistant TA would be responsible initially for answering their questions on that, but he's required to provide a process that mimics whatever their rules are. And he's charged under this, in substituting for the personnel board, he needs to be sure that the agencies within the selectmen follow the rules, and he needs to be sure that the other elected boards follow the rules.
But under the wording of may, does the town administrator say in hiring a new supervisor or something, just as an example, he would submit information to the personnel board? Would he have to wait on their advice, or can he just go through and receive, because it's may?
Yeah, he could proceed, doesn't have to, he's not required to wait for them. So, for example, they're hiring a crossing guard, which is, if you remember, look at the number of positions that are covered by Chapter 13. I think you were provided that by Katie Conlon. So if a crossing guard were being hired for the school year, he would be able to go ahead and hire the crossing guard. If they came back later and said, gee, you know, you didn't interview anyone else for the crossing guard, you interviewed one person, you know, that's the oversight that we'd like to see.
What would they then be able to do about that?
Well,
I mean, if he would go and say, I'm hiring a crossing guard, tell the personnel board, even after the fact, this is the person I interviewed, this is their resume, whatever information.
I think you'd have
Their
to-
rules required, and they say, well, we didn't like this, or we wanted to see more people. What sort of oversight would there be, or advice, if there's nothing, you just
He
say,
would have
well,
to-
that's the person I hired, sorry.
Yeah, he would have to explain to them why the rules were, in this case, say they interviewed no one, why the rules are broken. And he's accountable to the selectmen. So at this point, if the town administrator is ignoring the rules, then I would say the personnel board rightly would be going to the board of selectmen saying, hey, you hired the person, and the person's not following the rules that have been established. So there's accountability to the board of selectmen.
I'm just trying to determine, would the town administrator, he has to follow the rules that the planning board, personnel board sets. Would that include, you have to advise us before you hire anybody? Or you have to seek our advice before? Because it's may instead of should.
Right.
Yeah, the rules really apply to the process of the hiring in terms of, whether the job has to be posted first, for
Yes.
example, and that type of thing. Does not have to wait for their approval of what he's done.
Okay, so he doesn't have to wait for, let's say.
Right, so let's say
review
it's-
of any candidates or advice, or even review of, say, a job description being posted.
Well, the job description has to be approved by them, so the crossing guard.
Okay, so it does.
Yeah,
Right.
the job descriptions have to be approved by them. So the chief procurement officer, for example,
Yep.
that was just created, had to be a job description that was approved by the personnel board, and they did that.
You have a question?
So the final say is with the town administrator? Is that what you're saying?
In terms, the final say in terms of the
Who
appointment.
gets hired, the appointment?
Correct. But remember, it's a process of approval process. So for example, if the cemetery board has followed the personnel board rules, your assistant town administrator and your town administrator are determining whether the cemetery board followed the rules. So the appointing authority is the cemetery board for a cemetery employee. The town administrator is going to determine whether in fact the job was posted in accordance with the personnel board rules and whether the cemetery followed the hiring rules. The town administrator would not make a qualitative judgment as to whether that was the best candidate because the cemetery board made that determination. In the case of a fireman, they would check to see if the rules were followed, but the fire chief is the appointing authority for the fireman, for
Right.
example.
Scott, did you have a question?
I had two questions. In looking at some of the other samples from other towns compared to what is proposed here, I think there's some stark differences in terms of presentation. So personally, picking this up as a reader from the town on the town's website, it takes some digesting to get to really the heart of the matter. So I'm wondering, it doesn't appear that there's time between now and when this wants to go to town meeting this time around. Is there something that is pushing this timeline to have this go through now, or can it be reworked into some sort of a fashion where it's a little more digestible? That's the first question. And the second one, I think what came up the other night was that a separation of responsibilities between the quote-unquote legislative side and the executive side was a real concern that was voiced. And taking some of those responsibilities away from the personnel committee had some people a little uncomfortable, it seemed like. And removing some of those teeth from the personnel committee, I don't think is going to sit very well. Is there anything that can be added to these bylaws that require the town administrator and allows the personnel board to have some teeth in terms of his review, in terms of his step increases, and taking that responsibility away from the Board of Selectmen, where that responsibility is shared between the Board of Selectmen and the Personnel Committee? In my opinion, that would alleviate some of that uncomfortableness, giving some of that authority up off the Personnel Board. That's not really a question, but I guess is there something that's pushing this process along currently that needs to be done immediately? And is there something that could be added in here that adds a little bit more teeth to the Personnel Board's responsibility in terms of the town administrator?
Well, let me just, I'll speak to the first point. We have spent 19 months heavily involved in meeting substantially on this thing. It is possible that in the writing of the recommendation, there can be geography that takes paragraphs and relocates paragraphs within this. So you have the opportunity, we can sit down and say, listen, if you think there's a town administrator paragraph that's located under the personnel board paragraph, we can do a geography. That's not a material change because it's just relocating the same document, the same reference. So there is that opportunity to address your concerns if you think the town administrator sentence is mixed in with another one. So we can do that. I don't believe that it makes sense for the personnel board to be approving or having a say, if you will, in the raise or the employment status. However, if in fact the town administrator were to thumb the nose at the personnel board all the time, the personnel board has a right and an obligation to report to the Board of Selectmen and say, hey, you know, you may think he's a great person, but we haven't been able to get a response over the past year from the town administrator, and that should weigh in as you do your evaluation. But I don't believe they should be given an opportunity to veto or reduce their pay or something like that. And I would say, in terms of this legislative thing, I mean, as I said earlier at the beginning of this, the only thing I've seen objected to and heard objected to is this process approval. So was the process followed or not? Should that shift from that's an operational thing in our opinion. That's an operating item. That's a traditional role of a personnel department in a company or a nonprofit or a for-profit. Was the process followed? And this is for the non-union jobs. As, you know, and I guess the union jobs, you could say, was the union contract followed. But the issue is that we don't believe it's a legislative versus the executive. We simply see that for process purposes, for operational purposes, it's more efficient in hiring these days to make decisions that don't require a wait of 3 or 4 weeks. You know, boards of directors don't approve laborers. Boards of directors do not approve patrolmen. I was a member of the Board of Selectmen, and I sat there interviewing patrolmen, and frankly, I think it makes more sense to have it today with the town administrator doing that type of review, and that's after the police chief has done the recommendations. So the delegation of that authority and the operational efficiency of the town is what we're talking about. I don't know what the other sections of this proposed bylaw that they're opposed to. I mean, maybe the other one is they're opposed to giving up approving the step raises, but.
Margie?
I'm only opposed to the time factor. You just stated you have 19 months to review this, and now everyone is throwing all of this to this committee now, and we have a time constraint. I don't see what the difference will be in May as opposed to now, so that we can digest all of this information and hear more from both sides, and then we will have 2 additional selectmen, and we'll get their opinions as well. That's my #1 concern, and the only other concern I have is I'm a little bit concerned actually turning this whole responsibility over to the new town administrator, who's only been here less than a year. He has so many more things to do. As a matter of fact, if you read the front page of the Milton Times today, he's doing something regarding a new contract on DPW. Why isn't our DPW director doing that? So how much more can he get involved? And I think he still needs to be able to prove himself before we change bylaws. Maybe everyone here is fine, but as Mr. Hiss stated last week, there might not be the same way in years to come. And that concerns me. And the only other final thought is, we discussed union and how you need to negotiate and have it carried out now, and I agree with you. So why could we not separate that in the wording and state that he's able to do that without permission of the personnel board? You can move that along.
So first of all, we in fact deferred from the Springtown meeting. So we were ready to go in February.
But we didn't get the info.
There was info provided to the committee, and we said with Lee Michael McLean, we said we would pull back and hold and do further discussions with the personnel board. So this was ready to go last January.
Did those
and-
personnel board discussions happen?
Yes, they did.
They did.
Absolutely did happen, on record.
Well,
And the changes,
we
and some of the
weren't handed
changes,
all
in-
of these handouts.
I
Well, there's
can
been a
tell you,
I was
change in
on
the
the board.
personnel board and the warrant committee
Yeah.
Right.
since
I
then.
circulated material starting in, whatever, the 3rd week in August, so.
But
The
they kept
issue is that-
changing.
So it's been out there, and I understand that there's obviously the annual turnover in all committees and boards. I appreciate that, but the fact is, there's never a good time, if you will. And we're ready to work with a subcommittee of your committee. If you're not ready for the printing deadline, you may want to say no recommendation at this time and
Right.
spend the next 3 weeks, frankly, going through this thing. There's time between now and October 25th to work through this, and we're happy to sit down with whatever subcommittee of 3 or 5 of you that you want, and we'll sit down and walk through the red line version, and we'll go paragraph by paragraph to walk you through what the changes are, and go through that.
That may be an option, but we'll take that up in a second. Rick, thank you very much. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me back.
Mike, thank you for coming. We're interested to hear what the Personnel Board had to say about this bylaw change, and we're all ears.
Sure. So, again, thanks again. And again, I think this is a real case of people sincerely being interested in how town government works, and I think that's a positive thing. And I think the fact that you're asking these questions is good, and coming to the right resolution. So just a few brief comments, and I'll answer any questions. Number one is...
Yes, that's right. We're keeping you, this part of it, we are keeping to 10 minutes.
Oh, it will be...
So I'll cut you off.
I haven't even eaten dinner yet, so this is
I don't
perfect.
mind being rude, so just so you know that.
So, one, this isn't personal, right? So my presumption is everyone's working with integrity and goodwill, and someone pulled me aside the other night and said, oh, you threw someone under the bus or something like that. Let me be clear. We're just talking about facts, right? There are facts. So let's just stick to the facts, and if I ever said anything that was unfactual, let's correct it. To that point, sticking to facts, one of the selectmen suggested the other night that the collective bargaining agreements don't have anything about reviews in them. I confirmed that last night. 5 of them at least do. So I think it's important when people are speaking to something with authority that they be clear on what the facts are. And in that case, it was brought up, and there was a question I just wanted to confirm. I asked the assistant town administrator yesterday. She confirmed at least 5 of the contracts require reviews. So I did want to bring that up again on the context of facts.
Annual reviews, you're saying?
Yes, it's in the collective bargaining contracts. She indicated 5 of the unions. At the last meeting, a bit of concern, I heard one board member of the selectmen suggest that their role is policy and oversight, and that was a shift. And I heard another board member say that they're the CEO. Those are 2 very different perspectives, being a policy and oversight versus being a CEO. And so that was an interesting juxtaposition for me of one saying it and then a little bit later the other saying an opposite sort of situation. I think that speaks to the question of the role in the new role of a strong town administrator, and just making sure that there's clarity around it before you make significant changes. So I did want to bring that up as a point. So tonight, I speak for the Personnel Board and not personally. At our last meeting, my comments from the Warrant Committee were reviewed at our meeting last night, and there was unanimous agreement that removing the authority of the moderator-appointed committee would create significant political and practical problems down the road. That the intent of the TA legislation was clear, and that it was to give the TA authority previously vested in the Board of Selectmen, and to maintain the authority and integrity of the other elected boards. Now, the Personnel Board also unanimously agree that cleanup of the bylaw is necessary, that there are things in there that need to happen. We also wouldn't disagree with the DOR study giving the ATA more responsibility. We actually think those are good things. However, what we're saying is that without any authority, oversight is pointless, right? Oversight without authority is, you may as well just disband it. So we do think that there is opportunity. As written, though, the Personnel Board can notice issues but have no authority to address them. The idea being, as was stated the other night, that, well, then that will be up to the voters to decide. I think that we
Ultimately, everything is.
Right, ultimately, everything is, and I think if we can have a step before that, before it gets to that point, and be preventative, that would be a good thing. So the collective opinion of the Personnel Board is we think that there are adjustments that should and could be made, but we only see downside risk in this scenario, and that it's not in keeping with the original intent of the Strong Town Administrator legislation, as was stated in the warrant. The other piece is, the main complaint that we heard about the Personnel Board was the issue of timing of hiring for positions. 2 points on that. We've been discussing with the Assistant Town Administrator for a few months now about the streamlining of that process. We would actually also agree that should poor Director of the Library, Will Adamczak, have to come in for something that is, all the union rules have been followed, everything that he was supposed to do was done, he signed off on it. We're just really making sure that all those steps has been followed, everything's done, and a qualified candidate has been hired. Does he need to come out at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night to achieve that end? We think that there is a way to streamline that. If there's a streamlining of that, in turn what can happen is we can spend more time on those strategic matters, which we've been working with the Assistant Town Administrator on. Also to that end, where am I? I just lost my spot. We also think that there's a way to modernize that process, but also in the interim, what we've done is we've met 5 times since July 1st. Why? Because we're trying to be accommodating of all the new hires that are coming in. So our intent is always to work with the town and the town administrator and the assistant town administrator. So in fact, we actually just adjusted our meeting schedule again. So we met twice last month. We will meet twice again this month in order to accommodate that schedule. Because we feel that that's our obligation to serve the citizens. So for the main issue, if that's the main issue of, well, we're not responsive and there's not timing, we can resolve that. And we've worked to resolve that. And we agree that there are probably some process pieces that should be adjusted, and we would look for that advice really from the assistant town administrator. Finally, the biggest issue to give in giving the TA more authority is that we feel this was not the intention of the strong TA legislation as presented to the town, and undermines the role of the town moderator and moderator-appointed committees. We also feel there's the potential to put political pressure on the town administrator and the assistant town administrator with no protections for them. So that is the general sense of the personnel board. The other sense of the personnel board was a question about why the urgency for this? Why does this need to get rushed through? We understand that the town government study committee's been working on it for a while, and we've seen bits and pieces of it over time. But why a rush to make this change right now, when maybe a more thoughtful conversation could be had to answer all these questions? And again, it's not to say that the town government study committee hasn't had thoughtful questions. I think that there are other people engaged, particularly the other elected boards and things like that, so that there could be consensus before coming to this group. So that was the other question about urgency.
Has anybody any questions for my group?
Would you repeat the part about the moderator at the very, I didn't catch all the comments about it.
Oh, sure. So it was just, we don't feel that it was the intention of the legislation as it was written, and as explained in the warrant at that time, as I quoted from last time, in that we feel that it undermines the role of the town moderator and town moderated appointed committees.
Right, thank you.
I'm not even sure that was English when I said that.
Scott?
Again, I have two questions. One is, I appreciate Mr. Neely's responses because he was very specific in terms of issues and points that were made. I want to know specifically from the personnel board, specific duties that are being shifted that you oppose. Because if there's only 2 or 3 points, I think that's something that can be negotiated out. There seems to be a broad stroke from the personnel committee that's, oh, well, we're giving up responsibility here. Specifically, what are opposed? And the other piece was, you brought up the example of hiring of library staff. Is the personnel board really want to review every candidate and make sure the process has been followed before that person comes on? Or does it seem more, it just saves a lot of time that if once a month they're met and the people that were hired along the way, the process at that point was figured out to say, was this followed or not? And then have some teeth and recourse after the fact. I know you don't want to let people go, but again, there's a timing issue of when people get hired that you need to be sensitive to, or we're going to lose some talent. So I think those are I think we need to get a little bit more specific for a response from you guys to be able to have a better discussion.
Sure. So this first response is, it really has to do with the actual approving process, the actual signing off of the candidates, so the process was followed and there's qualified candidate. That is now shifting, according to this change, would shift to the town administrator signing off on that. The 2 specific challenges I have for that. One is, I think it's an overreach by the Board of Selectmen, because the town administrator is supposed to have taken on the responsibilities of the Board of Selectmen, not the responsibilities and authority of the cemetery, the library, who technically would still appoint the person, but subject to the approval of the town administrator. So to me, it's a basic governance problem of overreach. Ultimately, that would then make the elected boards now subservient to the Board of Selectmen, because to hire someone or make an appointment, they would have to get the approval of the town administrator, who is, based on the strong town administrator legislation, taken over the duties and responsibilities, some duties and responsibilities of the Board of Selectmen. So that's the issue. It's a basic check and balance concern on that. To your other question about, should you just wait, let someone get hired, and then address the issue? I think that would be a colossal mistake. Once someone comes on board, you never get rid of them.
Right.
And it's just that simple.
Very hard, certainly.
It's
not
nigh
good business.
impossible. And I think we've demonstrated, and we would agree, that if someone is signing off on all that process, and if it's the department head saying, this was followed, this was followed, this was followed, this was followed. It's even little things that sometimes slip, like, there's supposed to be a preference for people from Milton. There's and we've sent stuff back on this that just says, hey, you have to explain why, if there were 7 candidates and 2 are from Milton, you chose someone who wasn't from Milton. We're not gonna question that wasn't the better candidate, you just have to give the reasoning for it, which also protects you. So if we do that 2 weeks later, I think you put the town at risk.
Kevin?
Just check.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have problems on a lot of levels, but number one, I mean, my biggest concern is that you let governance do governance roles, you let management do management roles, and to me, it seems like the hiring and firing practice is clearly a management role. You have a human resources person. I don't suspect, and there's Board of Selectmen member out there in government study, but I would think that the town administrator would pass that role on to his human resource director to make sure that everything in the hiring practice was followed. So you're, so basically, other than a mistake, you're questioning the integrity of that human resource person.
So you design things, you're in the accounting business, right?
Yep.
You design things for controls.
That's right.
Right.
Control.
This
Control.
is a-
Procedures,
this-
policies, oversight.
Right, but.
That's control.
Oversight.
Not doing every blessed thing.
So I don't think anyone's suggesting that, Tom. So I would suggest, then what's the point of the warrant committee?
Exactly the same.
So you
Exactly
should
the
just get
same.
rid of it, and there should be no
Oversight.
oversight for it?
Oversight
So
and
that-
recommendations to town meetings.
So once the budget is done, the warrant committee, the town administration just do what they want? I think we fundamentally disagree on that, Tom. So that's just gonna be a disagreement on how we do
Once,
government?
once the budget is done, the warrant committee has no further role. Once it's approved by town meeting, that's the budget. The
Right,
warrant
but
committee
they-
has no further
They
role.
make the final recommendation on that budget.
That's
though.
correct.
So just in this case, the town administrator should make a final recommendation, or the department should make the final recommendation on the position, and it should just be ensured that all the due diligence has been followed. It's actually quite analogous.
It's not, because we're not really performing a management function, we're performing a function for
So
the people to vote at town.
budgeting's not a management function?
The budget is a management function, it's being done by management.
In the hiring process, it's
And
too, we're just
our
overseeing it
responsibility
with
is to
the
report to
authority.
town meeting and council town meeting, which is the legislative body, on how we think they should vote on management's budget. Yeah, and in the case of hiring, firing, there is no legislative vote on
So you
the hiring.
So you feel that the cemetery and these other boards should be subservient to the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator? Which was not what not what the legislation suggested.
I think, yes, there should be one human resource department that should make sure that all of the hiring practices are followed by all departments.
And
Now,
so-
unfortunately, they can't do that over schools because legislated they cannot without the school's approval. But they can on the other side.
So if the library personnel, the library board wants to appoint someone, and they put it forward, you'd say that the town administrator can deny that? Because that's how this is written.
I'm saying no, that provided that all of the hiring practices were performed correctly, then no, the town administrator would not have any reason. I'm not sure I'd go far as say no authority to, but certainly no reason.
So they would have the authority,
not to
and
approve
this is
the
the
hire.
problem, we have to plan for the time when a person may not act in goodwill. Not assuming everyone acts in goodwill, unfortunately, life happens, and that's what the controls are for.
We
So
have
that's where we would
time, we have
disagree.
time for 2 more questions.
to follow up on your conversation, to perhaps to clarify this to myself, in your situations, are you saying that the town administrator would be able to hire a new library director, get rid of Will, and hire a new one without the approval of the library trustees? You
No,
could do that
does not.
because
Does not have the,
under this.
no,
And the new, because that's what it sounded like you were saying, of
No.
putting the functions, and that was his point of putting, like, the cemeteries and library underneath
Right.
the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Was he saying, in his opinion, not to speak for you, sorry, that it looked like this amendment, or this article does that the town administrator would be able to have final hiring, as opposed to the other elected bodies? And that's what I thought you were getting at when you were saying it should, as management functions.
it is I think the hiring practice is a management function.
Yes.
Not a legislative function, not a governance function. The governance is the oversight.
So, in my example, with this article, the town administrator would not be able to just hire a new director should the position be opened without the library trustees.
There's a section in here that says the town administrator or other appointing authority shall provide information to the personnel board on all the new hires and promotions as they occur, and the personnel board may review, advise, and/or report to the town administrator or other appointing authority on all promotions. And it doesn't sound like it goes from the
I just
appointing
wanted to
authority to
clarify
the
from
town
your
administrator.
conversations
He's the one who
how
gets
that was
to
going.
hire whoever he wants to or fire whoever he wants to. There's an
He has the
appointing
final
authority.
appointing authority.
Yeah.
So he's the so that's the point, is he's ultimately, so then those boards and committees make the recommendation, but he ultimately, or the TA, because it could be a she, the TA has the ultimate authority for that hiring. So that's where I think politics.
Wait, please. You're gonna talk, you have to be in a microphone, and you have to be recognized.
So let me see if I get it right, just to, because I want to be factual, so go ahead. I'll yield my time here to Rick.
Well, you're almost done anyway.
For clarification here, this is the appointing authorities and the determination of the best candidate would be in the role of your example, the library board. So the library board will conduct the search, do the interviews, and it's up to them if they want to invite the assistant TA to participate or not. But it's strictly the appointing authority remains the elected board, the library commissioners. If the library board conducts no interviews, does not follow the rules of the personnel board, the assistant TA is obligated to recommend to the town administrator not to approve that appointment by the appointing authority, similar to what they would do. So simply, we're saying that the responsibility and the appointing authority is the elected board, whether it's the assessors, the park commissioners, the health board. They are the appointing authority under the law. They stay that way. The question is, did they follow the procedures? And if the personnel board can reject them under the current bylaw, in the new bylaw, the town administrator will reject them for not posting the job or following the personnel board procedures.
Who does that now?
Right.
Who does that function now? Is that
Personnel
The
board.
personnel board. Is that done in a timely fashion?
Yes, as you can see, we've adjusted our schedule to adjust that.
Okay. In the past, has it been done in a timely fashion, would you expect?
We have not had significant complaints, and when things were pressured, we would adjust our schedule.
Okay, because we had a little discussion before you came about how this all came about.
Well, his
And-
history was you met once a month, right?
Uh,
Historically.
Yeah, we have.
Once a
Yeah,
month.
yeah. So there's some background here that obviously played into the request to have this examined and with the product that we see before us.
Right.
One sort of follow-up, and then this
One
is-
follow-up and
Yep,
then.
no, this is it.
and then-
It's just a clarification or amendment of my scenario, say, for the library director. All the procedures are followed. They posted it, they interviewed the board of library trustees wants candidate A. Town administrator, I've been going through all the procedures because there were numerous candidates, interviews, everything was followed procedurally, correct, but it boils down to two. One, the town administrator favors, one, the library trustees favors. Who gets hired? Who gets to say who gets hired, A or B?
That's a very easy answer, because under the new rules and under today's rules, they don't know who the second place and third place people are on any job. So there's no qualitative decision-making
Well,
here.
under the procedure, they both ideally should have seen both
They
candidates,
don't-
interviewed them.
The personnel board and under this proposed bylaw, the town administrator does not get the second place finisher or the third place finisher. They don't know who the other candidates are.
So the town administrator
But he
is
could
more of a
request it.
rubber
They
stamp
don't
of the
see the second
library
place.
committee,
He could
of the
request
library
it.
The personnel
trustees.
board requested today?
No, but what I'm
So-
saying is we have to
so-
prepare
sorry,
for the.
Sorry,
town.
I just wanted to finish
The
this,
answer
I
is
want to
no.
clarify, Mike,
The
so,
process would be in the rules. The rules have been, and the rules would continue to be the personnel board rules, to forward the final candidate. So the town administrator would not know who the second place or third place finisher is.
so, under my scenario, that wouldn't be due, the library trustees would put forth the one candidate, and the town administrator would then,
Up or down?
Up or
up or
down,
down, hire them.
as they do now
And
to the
if he
personnel
says
board.
no, then they have to go through again and find another candidate.
Gene, you had a question.
Oh, actually, that answered it. That was good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. One more,
I
Scott?
mean, this could be part of the discussion we're gonna have, but I think some of the concern is future down the road, what's gonna happen,
Yes.
you know, if a but what happens if the personnel board takes a turn and they're not doing their job? This falls back to a big pile of whatever.
Right.
And so I think that's the counterbalance to that argument.
Okay. I think now is the time for our discussion. Mike, thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much.
So, I think our next item on the agenda, obviously, is the discussion of this point and determining how we want to proceed with it, given many factors, given the complexity of the issue, given what we've heard presented, given the timing, that we're under great pressure, actually, to get this recommended one way or another, or not. And so I'm opening the floor for discussion, and we're going to limit the discussion to 15 minutes on this point because we have other things to talk about.
Just a quick question that may have been brought up before, is like, are we expecting a different version of this article from the
It was
Board of
brought up to our
Selectmen
attention.
from
No,
tomorrow?
it'll be the same. It's just, if you look at the article now, the article is very, very brief. So there'd be no changes to it, but it would just be expanding what's already here in the article. That's the only change.
All right, so there's the question. What we are seeing, what we have in front of us is...
It's not
this-
going to change.
It's not going to change. What is going to be expanded then,
If you read the article itself, it's very, very brief.
right?
So the article would incorporate all of the changes into it.
Okay, so the text that we are supposed to approve is not in front of us?
That is-
Recommendation. The recommendation is in front of you.
But the text, we don't know what we're recommending if we don't see the
The
text.
the draft recommendation that was submitted to you is now becoming the article.
Right, but we have, my question is there going to be any change to the draft recommendation?
No.
Okay, that's what we have to look at. Okay, so, discussion is open. Margie?
I feel as though we're putting the horse before the carriage. I mean, the carriage.
Well, that's what you want. You want the carriage behind the horse, but I think I get what you meant.
In this financial management review
Yes.
that was done, on page 14, it also says we should conduct a review of the town bylaws. And I feel the town bylaws need to be changed, they need to be clarified before we start changing additional bylaws. I think we need to straighten out our existing bylaws first. That's just my own opinion.
Okay. Jean?
I would like to see a subcommittee formed, and so the committee in itself could continue on, doing what we do.
Yep.
And a subcommittee get more involved in all the pertinent information and bring it back to us. I think we should direct the problems that we have about the process to the subcommittee and let them work with the personnel board and the town study committee.
I disagree. I think we're so involved with this, and it's a big deal. I think everyone here wants to be able to participate firsthand and obtain their own knowledge with this. This is a big deal.
I would just add, so Scott asked a pretty basic question that was pretty enlightening to me, and that was sort of, what's the point of difference that the personnel board has with the documentation? And I kind of narrowed it down to the one issue about the responsibility for approving the persons that meet the requirements of the position, shifting from the personnel board to the town administrator. And kind of, getting right to that point, I think the intent was to do that, so that the town administrator is the one person who is sort of overseeing what the boards are doing, And I kind of feel comfortable enough with the discussions that we had with Rick and Mike, that was really the bone of contention. And then the answer just wasn't sort of, didn't move me to go away from what's been put here. So I'm comfortable with changing the duties and haven't had the discussion about where is the bone of contention in this one issue. I think the intent of the change in the article is on point, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with that, and I think too, we're also losing sight of all the other things that this article is giving to the Personnel Board in terms of really trying to define a role in the oversight process, even albeit advisory, in contract negotiations. I mean, there is a lot of talent on that Personnel Board, and why not take advantage of it? Any good manager knows that, you don't act alone. You make available all the resources you have to make a proper decision. I mean, that's how you stay around, and that's how you make good management decisions. So I think this article does that. I think it adds a lot of good fodder for, the Personnel Board. A lot of good oversight.
Tom,
Scott.
so if the,
Scott, please.
I was just gonna say, I agree with Tom on that. And I also agree that the intent of the chapter revisions are on point. I almost think that it doesn't go far enough. There's some other samples from other towns that really address issues that for both union and non-union employees.
Can you give an example? I'm interested.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I know.
it's a
There's five-
37-page document.
There's 5 dozen in there, but just for
harassment
instance.
policies, that kind of
That's
stuff
not
that
addressed,
are not
right.
addressed in
Not
the
addressed at
personnel
all.
bylaw.
Right.
That needs to be addressed.
Right.
I think that, like I said, this doesn't go far enough, and I think we're shorting the town of Milton that it doesn't go far enough. So that's my concern. I agree with the intent of the article. I just think it needs a rework to make it more digestible, but also to include some things that aren't in there. And I think it takes someone who knows the CBA agreements with all the unions in terms of what is covered under the CBA, what's not, what are the deficiencies in those agreements that should be and can be addressed by this bylaw that aren't. It's a more global look at this thing versus, all right, this is the way it was, there's some reworking, some changes, and here it is. It looks exactly the same format, and it's as unreadable as the other format, in my opinion. So, I think there can be a lot of good that's done here. So that's my
Chris?
I think I agree both that this is a worthwhile change and probably the right direction, and also that there's more work to be done. I guess my only concern about that is having the perfect be the enemy of the good, and I wonder whether accepting the fact that there might be more work to be done, it would be better to go ahead and recommend this article, see how it goes, and then, after some time, see if there needs to be some further change made, either in conformity with some of the things that you're suggesting, or perhaps there are new problems that arise. Perhaps some of the ones that Mike has pointed out, or perhaps others that are unanticipated. So while I would agree with you, I think it's probably worth recommending the article regardless.
I have a question. So if the article gets recommended and the bylaw is changed, and then they want to tweak it because everything wasn't expanded upon, how difficult is it to go back and update or get the bylaw changed? Wouldn't it be better to have it?
As long as there's no substantial.
This is the beginning of allowing it to go to, and becoming
I
a
can answer
bylaw without all the right stuff.
As long as there's no substantial change to the bylaw, you can move things around within sections, you can clarify wording, as long as it doesn't.
But there's significant things missing
But
from
and that was the other point I
bylaw.
wanted to make. You gotta be careful when you write a law that is subject to, I mean, we're writing a bylaw that is a human resources bylaw, which is a constantly evolving law that we have no control over. So I think you want to be somewhat vague enough so that,
To allow for play in the joints.
exactly, because we don't control, it's not like United States Congress writing a law that's the law of the land. This is just the law of Milton until somebody else changes the law.
Yeah, because aren't there some things, I'm sorry, there's some things that we could add in that are more rules and regulations?
It could be, yeah.
Versus bylaws changes.
I'm proposing to readdress this in the spring, if necessary. Confirm with the chair of the personnel board if they can, to finish outstanding businesses, then if the chair needs to call more meetings like they proposed, then to do that. In the spring, rate the performance of the board. If the job duties were satisfied, then they retain their duties. I know the governor's council vets and hears nominated judges by the governor, and they all have to agree before a judge is appointed in the state. So, Milton can avoid some embarrassments or some judgments, disciplinary actions, if we properly vet candidates. So, I don't think there's a rush to change over responsibilities. I've heard both gentlemen speak, and that's what I have to say about it.
Second.
Well, we have to put that up. We're not finished. We haven't closed out discussion.
Still discussing.
Hold that thought, it's a good thought.
To follow on at least the pushing to the spring piece of it, not to just kick it down the road a bit, but
Yes.
now you have people interested. You
Right.
have people showing up multiple
Yes.
nights a week. There is a decision that people want made in this article. If we just do this, nothing else is going to change in the bylaw. It's gonna lay there looking like this and being unreadable. If we could take the time and commit to take the time to actually rewrite it so that it's understandable, digestible, which is not, it's not like
Comprehensive, possibly. too.
comprehensible, and it's not
not
like we're trying to be perfect, and I love the saying and follow it generally, but if you look at any of the examples of other bylaws, which I've only barely begun to do, this is the worst one I've seen. It's just a big mass of words. There's a lot of templates out there. It may not be particularly substantive, but I find it hard to get to the substance in this. I hear what people are saying when they're talking up here. I see it in the summary. I cannot find what is being said in the words. And that's what I do for a living.
Okay, so we have.
Could I make one more comment?
Very briefly.
That's a good comment that you made. Keep in mind, though, the recommendation becomes the motion at town meeting. So as long as you're not out of scope with the article, you can write the recommendation any way you want. In other words, you could do all those changes in terms of making the wording more clear and as long as it's still within the scope of the article.
As a practical matter, we don't have time.
We don't have
That's
time,
right.
there's
We
no
don't-
way we
that's
can
why
do it.
Well, you do in the sense that, yeah, we don't have time between now and,
May.
September 22nd when it goes to
but we do
print.
have time between now and October 25th. When's special town meeting?
23rd.
23rd, yeah.
But why is this so important?
Yeah,
I know.
but I'd rather have
I think
the
this-
thoughtful approach and then get the
Does anybody have any
decisions.
more commentary? Because I think we're bringing ourselves
Yes.
A lot of the-
to reach a consensus.
Right.
If I may, a lot of the points were basically procedure and the rules set by the personnel board, that we have a new personnel board, a new chair, a new town administrator that's only been in for less than a year. I think we might want to give these new people new procedures, chance to actually operate and work, see if they can be improved internally. I mean, we've seen, or had testimony that personnel board is meeting more frequently in order to accommodate new hirings and things, as opposed to what we heard about the complaint that they only meet once a month and we need to hire people immediately. My opinion is we do need to look at this a little more carefully, have time to write a proper recommendation that actually addresses the things properly that should be, and also give time for a new personnel board and a new town administrator to actually establish their procedures and work together to see if they have a chance to improve under the existing.
Okay, so the sense that I'm getting is that if we do not recommend what we see before us, this bylaw change, that we're not saying this is a bad idea, we don't want this to happen, that we do want this to happen, but we want it to happen somewhat differently than what is being offered.
Yes.
And Jean brought up, I think, a suggestion for a subcommittee. Clinton has a great idea also. Gwen, I mean, the idea is to morph this into something that would be rather more comprehensive, substantive, et cetera, in the spirit of what is being intended and what's being proposed, and to accommodate the concerns of the town administrator, the selectmen, and the personnel board. The methodology for doing all that can be done very many ways. I mean, we could kind of be the quarterbacks of it and ask for representatives to join and do this over a period of weeks or whatever, or we could have the personnel board, the government studies committee, get together and look at all these things with input from us or a subcommittee. There are a couple of ways we can do it. But I think what we have to do, practically speaking, is come up with what we want to tell the town meeting.
Sorry. Also, we want them to make sure, as far as the hiring process is concerned, that they're actually doing
What they're supposed to be doing.
what they're supposed to be
Right.
doing. So, I
Yes.
mean, whichever side wants to do it and take on that role. So we want to make sure we are giving them what we want as far as that is concerned.
And what they need.
Right.
Absolutely. I
So
don't
just keep
disagree.
that honest,
I think we're-
transparent as possible.
Yeah, I think
as well.
we're agreed. I think we're agreed on that point. But I guess what we have to lead ourselves to is how we want to respond. Do we want to have a motion to accept this as written, or do we want to modify our response and tell the town meeting, we have a recommendation, it's not minimizing what this is, but it's saying we need to work on this a little bit more before we give approval and recommend it for adoption by the whole town meeting.
So the recommendation would be to remand it back for study.
Remand it back to the, I thought that would be that. So anyway, I think then we have, if discussion is completed, I think we should probably put this up to a vote of the committee. Do we have a motion to accept this as written? Anybody going to
I
second?
move to
that?
accept as written.
Accept it as written.
I'll second.
We
So
have,
moved.
it's moved. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Just procedurally, you should ask for discussion before.
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
a vote. I mean, the chair would ask for.
Oh, okay.
Any discussion, seeing none.
I'm sorry.
All's
I
in
thought we
favor.
had plenty of discussion.
Right, but the discussion.
In that case, I would have never.
Procedurally, the discussion.
Discussion on the motion.
Thank
The
you very
discussion
much.
comes after the.
I'm a little rusty on my Robert's
Thanks,
rules.
I didn't mean to step on it. That's okay.
Discussion on the
I
motion.
apologize. So that does not pass. The chair will entertain a revised motion.
Just to give them more time to retain their duties.
Okay, put it into,
I think there's already a motion on the table.
the motion
There's
is,
already a motion on the table that's been seconded, so.
and we voted on it, didn't we?
No.
We did, all right,
And
all
you
in
didn't
favor?
ask for well, we didn't ask for discussion
All
first.
right.
To his point,
That's all.
All right, so motion to approve as written has been made and seconded. Any discussion further?
What are we approving as written? I thought we were going to get more information on.
Well, we have the bylaw in front of us. We have the
I'm trying to
proposed
short
change.
circuit that night.
But
We have
then
the,
what good is all of
the
this
motion is
extra
to
work?
accept this as written.
the motion is to
So
accept
we're
it as
discussing
written.
the motion, should we accept it as written?
Well, that's, the motion is to accept it as written, and we're having the discussion.
No.
I just, as part of the discussion, I say, no, we should not take it as written.
Right, exactly. So the motion is we're not going to take it as written. So I'll ask if this
That's my
discussion, is
contribution to
there,
the
is there
discussion.
anybody who wants to say anything about it now? Otherwise, we're going to take it to a vote.
I am not a person who likes to
Rush.
keep revising and keep adding work to this committee. I think we need to take a breath, and I think it's, what both the gentlemen have brought forward have merits, and I think we should thank them for it and take their wise direction and turn it into something we're all proud of. And to keep redoing this is
don't
not
disagree.
doing anybody any good, I think.
Okay. So the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of accepting it as written, say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3.
I'm an aye.
That's
So I'm an aye.
Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 opposed. The motion does not pass.
So now we need to,
I'm on record.
So we need a new motion.
I motion that.
Make a motion to recommend return for study.
Further study.
Is the motion to remand for further study?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to remand for further study.
Now we have to ask for discussion about this
Comes
motion.
back from May meeting.
After it's
Well,
seconded.
the motion has been made to remand for further study. We have a second. Second. Discussion.
Does that-
Questions?
Does that entail the statement that would like them to come back in order to take this up for discussion for the May town meeting?
We can. We can remand it with that proviso.
Could be
I'd like
part
to
of
see
it.
them, you know,
Yes.
do their duties and see how that goes, and then, yeah, come back.
And visit us.
Right.
Okay.
I guess my question is, within the next 6 months, if this gets kicked down the road, are we gonna do work to redo this, or are we gonna revisit this in a year from now and look at a revised set of documents?
Well, I think
Two different motions.
one thing we can ask, if we were voting to remand it to committee, we can remand it with provisions. And one provision would be to see it on a periodic basis as the process evolves and as pieces of it are put in by the concerned parties. Does that make sense? Jean?
I can only speak for myself, but I feel like I don't know enough about this to make a good judgment on it. And I feel like these gentlemen have studied this, and they do understand it. I wish I knew as much as they did, and I don't. So until I can follow everything everybody says, until it becomes what I think is good for Milton, I don't want to recommend anything. So we have a lot of ways we can go about that. One is a study group. I feel it's sort of redundant because we've already had a study group.
Right.
So I think maybe a few members on this board could take the material that's already been presented to us, compare it with what other towns have done, and let's start out with what we want for the town, and then insert the people that are going to do it. But I think we're again, we have the cart before the horse. Why don't we get what we want, and then say who's going to implement it, following the advice of the gentleman.
Okay, Doug, I saw your hand
I'm
first.
sorry, it might be preempting you, but
Yeah,
I think,
go ahead.
I think our three options are accept it as written, say, no, we don't recommend it as written, or we remand it back to for study, and then do
true.
as you
Yeah.
suggest,
Yeah.
learn more, come up with a
Absolutely, yeah,
split the baby sort of
absolutely.
decision.
Be able
Which
to
is the
understand
current
what they're
motion on,
saying.
which is what the
Yes.
current motion on the table
Yeah.
Are
is.
we able to say defer, no action, and make a recommendation that we are asking them to come back at the May town meeting?
Those
That's
are-
we're remembering further study.
Yeah, those are the three
That's what-
options,
Yeah.
yes, no, or we gotta look at
I
it.
do have one other, and I'm sorry, we need name tags, because I'm never going to remember anybody's
They're
name.
locks up, we've got the tags for the
So forgive me if I just point it. But a little bit of what I was hearing you suggesting is a little bit of concern. You remember, we don't write the articles, we're not the committee, but we're the committee to kind of hear what
Right.
come before us and make a decision on it. So we shouldn't be in the process of writing
Right.
the bylaw.
Yeah.
You
it's
know,
not
I just want to make that
right.
clear.
We can ask, we
Right.
can ask to be
clarification
briefed
of the
Right.
town.
periodically what's happening, what does it look like, et cetera, which may not be the worst thing in the world because it would also save the crunch in the springtime.
I was just commenting on the fact that everybody is impressed by what other towns are doing, and there is absolutely no reason why we can't have that format if we want it.
No, I
But
don't
I don't
disagree.
think anybody here, I don't know that anybody has the expertise of these, and we should.
Well, that's why we send it back to them.
Yeah.
Because they do have the expertise, they have the sense and the request that they would have. I mean, they've heard us,
That's right.
my God, they've heard us for an hour talking about this, so
Yeah.
they know kind of sort of what we're wanting, what our concerns are, and reflecting back to them. Thank you very much for coming, it's been incredibly helpful, and you've done, enormous work, and we're not all done yet, I don't think, with, if you hear the sense of the committee, that we're encouraging, but not completely accepting of everything, because it seems to the group that there's still some stuff to be done. And I would suggest in collaboration with the Personnel Board, et cetera. So, we still have the motion. Is there any more discussion to remand to committee?
Yeah, I would just add that I kind of feel like, and taking off what Gene said, that these folks have done the work. They've had their internal discussions. They probably have butted heads many a nights.
Sure.
And they came and presented to us their differing views and opinions, and this is what we have. I'm thinking that this is what we have to make a decision or a recommendation from. We have our discussion, and I think by remanding it back, are we confident that we're going to get a different product? Based on some extensive work and discussions that
We need to
folks have
provide
done.
clarity on what it is we're going to see. You're missing out on tremendous efficiency here. You're kicking out a tremendous efficiency down the road for really, I'm sorry, form over substance here. And we gotta be clear on what we're gonna wanna see the next time.
I don't disagree.
Because you're killing a major efficiency here over forms. So we need to be clear as to what that form's gonna be so we can get it right the next time.
Suggestion on that score.
Isn't readability one issue?
Yes. Go ahead.
I just object to it being called form. To be able to understand what it's saying is slightly more than just form. It's not just the formatting of it. It's that the word plan has 3 different meanings in the same paragraph. It is imprecise in how it's drafted, to an extent where you're not actually sure who does what. I don't actually see in here, and it could be me flipping and trying to figure it out here, where anybody has the authority to hire somebody. I don't see that laid out in a way where you could flip to it and point to that. So we're saying that the authority to hire is shifted, but if you can't find it in the document, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
What we're saying in this room isn't going to, there are going to be different people reading the same words, and they could come to an entirely different conclusion. It's just not a way to write any sort of rules.
Fair enough, but what I don't understand is, okay, who fixes it for the next time? That's an education for me. Fair enough, fair
There are
point.
hundreds of
Okay.
examples of Massachusetts town bylaws that have personnel boards that do very similar things to ours, except explain it. I don't know how it got to this point, because everyone else's seems to be fairly clear and have some really basic template information, explanation, and so it is almost putting it into that format so that you can read and identify who has what obligations or mays and shalls and all of that.
I don't think that reflects all the work that's gone into this and all the,
I don't think anybody's at all denigrating. There's been an enormous amount of work put in. I mean, 19 months, my God, that's incredible. Chris?
But I think, just let me, if I can address the question, I think, and also since Rick in particular is here, we can, play it out. I think when you you laid it out pretty well. It appears that, at least the sense of the committee is that terms need to be better defined. And they need to be used consistently in a way that's readable for the Warrant Committee, which can be a proxy for the rest of the town. And I think that, to me, seems a pretty key component, and I think that that's something that can probably be easily remedied. I think that's a pretty important recommendation. And I think there were a couple of other things that on the other side of it. I think some of us in the committee think that there probably can be more that can be done within the actual article to address some of the shortcomings in hiring, like harassment. I think you brought up, Scott. It seems to me that those are 2 fairly clear recommendations we can give to you and your board.
I would add a third, just process and timing for each one of the items. There's a sentence that says that the personnel board will consult with the warrant committee a timeframe in which that should happen in advance of the meeting so that we can have a process in place and not have everything come out at the end too, would be appreciated. But I'm sure, I know there's other items that could have timing and process frameworks that would make them easier to apply as well.
Anything else? Okay, so, motion to remand to the committee with the proviso, the periodic updates to the warrant committee are provided and will incorporate items including, but not limited to, more precise drafting, terms and text, better defined and in more readable format, allocation of responsibilities, addressing of substantive clarifications with regard to current HR factors, including harassment in parens, and clarity of explanation, format, and timing.
Yes,
Does that work?
yes.
I think that works.
Okay, so, is that the end of discussion?
Someone wants to be heard over there?
You're not a member of the committee, we're voting.
They don't.
You can hear after we vote. You can be heard after we vote.
I'd just like to ask a point of order question from the audience. Who is the committee?
Which committee?
A
It says
subcommittee.
you're remanding to the committee.
To the Government Studies Committee.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're ready for the vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All against? 1, 2,
Can I
3.
abstain?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, the motion carries, however.
Yes. However,
So,
fair enough.
6 against, 1 abstention. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, next. I think we can take a 5-minute break. And then we'll come back for another half hour and discuss a couple of these other warrants. There are a couple of ones that I think are relatively straightforward that we can go through pretty quickly. And the remaining ones we'll address on Monday, and we'll be in pretty good shape.
Point of order.
So, yes.
We don't have to move for a break, right?
We don't have to move for a break. But if you don't want to take one, you don't
I'm
have
taking a
to.
break. Keep a break right there. Keep it right there.
If you can go from here, good.
5 minutes. We're back here at 8:17. Back to order. We have the Milton, members of the Milton Historical Commission coming to present to us. We have a few articles that they are concerned with. Please introduce yourselves and...
All right, my name is Steve O'Donnell, Chair of the Historical Commission, Meredith Hall, member, and Bill Mullen, member. We have submitted an article for October town meeting to update and amend Chapter 22 of the general bylaws, which is entitled Demolition of Historically Significant Buildings. This bylaw was originally passed at Springtown meeting in 2007, about 10 and a half years ago. And we think it's time to update it in 3 specific areas.
It's section 5E, yes? Is this the same one I'm looking at?
No, it'll be
Chapter 22.
Oh,
Chapter
sorry,
22.
Chapter 22, sorry.
Very,
So give us, just bear with us. We're-
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Probably near the
towards
back.
the end, everybody.
Large print.
Yeah, right, with the big print. That's good for me.
it's the big print, yes.
Right.
Thank you.
We like that. Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead. Please continue.
The general summary of the demolition delay bylaw, which is officially called the Demolition of Historically Significant Buildings. The object, obviously, is to try to enhance the preservation of historic buildings in town, also historic vistas, neighborhoods, the character of the town. This specific bylaw requires a demolition application on a building, this is currently now, on a building built before 1919 to be forwarded to the Historical Commission. If the Historical Commission determines that the building is historically significant, then the applicant needs to file a demolition plan explaining why it needs to be demolished, the economic reasons, the physical reasons. It's in the middle of a 5-acre parcel and he wants to build a subdivision or whatever his reasons are. And after receiving the demolition plan, we schedule a public hearing. And after the public hearing, the commission makes a determination of whether or not the property is preferably preserved. If it's voted preferably preserved, then currently there is a 9-month demolition delay imposed, during which the building commissioner can't issue a demolition permit. And the purpose of the delay period is to allow interested parties an opportunity to figure out an alternative to demolition. Renovation, rehabilitation, incorporation of the building into the larger project, or even relocation of the building. Much less preferable in our minds, but nevertheless, it preserves a building. So, in a nutshell, that's what the whole thing is all about. We are proposing 3 specific changes. We're proposing a change from the 1919 trigger year to a rolling year, a year 75 years prior to the date of application. Now, one of the reasons for that is when this bylaw was initially proposed 10 years ago, it was 78 years. And at town meeting, a prominent town meeting member who had a building which would have fallen under the bylaw was instrumental in having the years pushed back to 88 years. So what we're doing is essentially re-proposing what was originally proposed to a 75-year, but it would be rolling forward. Second item is really a housekeeping issue. The current bylaw provides that in the event a public hearing is necessary, 4 copies of the demolition plan need to be provided to the commission. We're asking for 8 copies. There are 7 members, plus the planning office needs 1. So rather than scurrying around and having the town make the extra copies, that's really a housekeeping issue. The third item is extending the 9-month demolition delay period to 24 months. Now, that may sound like a long time, but 9 months to a developer is like a long weekend. The way developers work and their planning and the whole thing, we haven't encountered it in Milton, but other communities have encountered situations where the developer receives the imposition of a 9-month demolition delay. He says, "Thank you very much, that's fine, it ties right into my plans." And 9 months is not a long time to just sit and wait. We've seen it here in Milton, they see it a lot of other places. Oh, I'll wait the 9 months. If a property is going to be incorporated into a larger development, plans need to be modified. If a building is going to be relocated, a site has to be found for it. Financing has to be obtained. It takes time. The other element is that a demolition delay bylaw of this type discourages demolition applications. If a developer knows that he may have to wait 2 years, he may think a little harder about how to incorporate what's there into his project. There was a case this year in particular where somebody bought a house, wasn't a developer, it was a private owner. And after he bought it, he thought he'd like to demolish it. So he told his attorney he wanted to file an application to demolish and so forth. And the attorney said, "Well, okay, but from the time you file that initial application to the day you can really start demolition, it's going to be about a year." And he said, "Oh, okay, then I won't. I'll remodel." So the mere fact that the demolition delay is there tends to discourage. And we only had 1 public hearing this past year. And that was the only application for demolition we had this year. We had 7 last year. And either 5 or 6 we determined were not historically significant. So we're not obstructionists. We just have the opportunity to examine the property, and is it historically significant? And even if it is historically significant, it may not be preferably preserved. The one we had this year was definitely historically significant, but not preferably preserved, due to significant deterioration of the property. The one we had last year that was historically significant, but not preferably preserved, again, was significantly deteriorated and in a location that simply would not have lent it to a rental property, because the owner was no way he was going to sell it. And we just said, there's just no point in postponing the inevitable. The other thing that a lot of towns have found, Milton hasn't experienced it very much, is developers coming in, buying small houses, tearing them down, building a big house. Wellesley's been hit hard, Needham's been hit hard, Newton's been hit hard. Newton, by the way, has a 50-year trigger.
1957.
1957.
They just recently passed.
60 years.
50 years, yeah.
Well, 1957 would make it 60 years.
Yeah.
It was 57 is their trigger date.
Okay, 57, all right, okay.
Because they were seeing entire neighborhoods.
I misread the, okay.
It's okay.
But more recent than
understand.
ours. And when developed, so much of Milton was developed since World War I, certainly after World War II,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole neighborhoods. And if you go in and okay, I'll take down that house and I'll buy that, take it down, I'll take down that one and build a McMansion, I'll take down that one and build a McMansion. Before you know it, the whole character of the neighborhood has changed. Nothing is going to prevent demolition, period. We can't do that. Nobody can do that. It's private property. People have a right to do what they want. All we can do through this bylaw is encourage people to think of an alternative to demolition. Now, the other thing, a lot of cities and
1 minute warning.
Okay. A lot of cities and towns have the Community Preservation Act. So the town can actually assume a financial position in preserving historic property. We don't have that opportunity here. So we would hope to have your support. This is a bylaw co-sponsored by the selectmen. We would hope to have your support going into town meeting.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions? Tom?
A couple. Steve, historically significant, is there a definition of that, or is it just in the
Yes.
eyes of the beholder?
Building which is importantly associated with one or more historic persons or events with the architectural, cultural, political, economic, social history of the town or the Commonwealth, or is historically or architecturally important by reason of period, style, method of building construction, or association with a particular architect or builder, either by itself or in the context of a group of buildings. This is where the neighborhood starts to come in. And preferably preserved is any historically significant building, which because of the contribution made by such a building to the town's historical and our architectural resources, is in the public interest to preserve, rehabilitate, or restore.
Okay.
And then my second question is, the hearings, is there any requirement that the hearing the public hearing take place within a certain amount of time?
Yes.
Okay,
Very quickly.
It's very structured.
okay, good.
Yep.
Okay,
45 days after we get the demolition permit,
Permit.
within 45, we have to hold the hearing.
gotcha, okay. I have no other questions.
Any other questions?
You said how many historical remodels have you had? You said 5 out of the 7, what was that?
I think the vast majority never go to a public hearing. Again, the one we had this year did go to a public hearing, but it was not preferably preserved. I think 5 out of the 7 last year were determined to be not historically significant. They were kind of ordinary houses. 3 of them were on Pleasant Street, 2 of which right at the entrance to the new little subdivision up near Bent's. They tore 2 houses down in order to. There was nothing significant about either. They were okay houses, but nothing significant. And there was a 3rd one, a half a mile down Pleasant Street. Nothing significant about it.
And if it's been altered, even if it was built at a certain period and it's been altered and changed, we would not hold that up. So that's
And you're making the determination of historical significance based upon this definition?
correct.
Another follow-up, sorry. How many cases in Milton have properties been moved? That someone has opted to move it due to historical significance?
We have suggested it, but it has not happened.
Hasn't happened.
The Swift Hat Shop, for example, down in the Lower Mills, we have been encouraging the owner of that property to move it to another site. And to salvage it if at all possible. We would love for it to stay in its existing condition and for him to rehab it. And it's really demolition by neglect, and it's intentional, and he would love to build condos there. So we've been working with him, but he wants land swapped, and, it's been
So there's been no
difficult.
cases of it?
So we know.
The only case I can think of historically is the Suffolk Resolves House was picked up from its site and then taken up to Canton Avenue.
That was
But
1950.
That was that was right, almost 70 years ago. That was the last one
And
that I
again,
could think
the
of.
ordinary house, without any particular historical significance, isn't worth moving.
That's right.
But historically significant, yeah.
There are instances of incorporation. We got the one, Widmere, the 36-unit subdivision, the St. Pius.
Yes.
Yes.
And they saved the main.
And they saved the main.
They saved the main mansion there.
And if, once we finally go through with the
Carberry.
Carberry estate, there'll be two or three homes up there. that will
There- We think 3, they were talking 2, and now they're saying 3.
You said they renovated it?
Yes, that hasn't started yet, but the other one.
Would be incorporated into the development.
Okay.
And what you're running into in Milton, you may have a large Victorian house or a large Gilded Age house, late 19th century, in the middle of a 5-acre parcel. Well, we'll tear it down and we'll build 5 single-family houses. Because of where it's situated, you can't,
Hard to do that.
no, could we, And certainly, the Master Plan Implementation Committee is doing things that are going to encourage and enhance the preservation. And I understand there's a couple of other ideas floating around the planning board for making it easier to convert some of these larger homes into 2 or perhaps 3 units, rather than demolishing them and, every time you say, well, can't you, well, no, I can't get the frontage and I can't get the area because the house is right in the middle.
There was an example of that. Paul Sullivan did move a house on Columbine Road.
Yes.
To make a way for a development behind where Deval Patrick used to live, in that little neighborhood there. That was an example of a house that was moved and restored, and then they were able to put a little street behind it, tuck a street behind it.
Okay.
And I think the incentive was to not tear that property down.
Okay, thank you.
And just quickly, out of curiosity, the 2 years that you want to use, 24 months, and where does that fall in terms of the average of towns that have this kind of delay?
It's a little bit ahead of the curve.
What we have been seeing is that towns are voting, this is sort of a new tool, and towns don't have many ways of historic preservation because it's private property, but the tool has been, the towns have been voting to extend it. They're coming back, starting with a 9-month, then going to a 15-month, going to 18 months. And so right now, there are 9 with 18 months. But what we are seeing is, we would be
There are
being
8 with
proactive.
18 months.
There are 8 with 18 months. So we're seeing the timeline pushed out because larger developers with deep pockets can afford to wait.
wait it
And it takes them that long in their planning process anyway. So the 24 months really gives time for community input and for there to be community support or ideas for ways that this could be incorporated and not necessarily a demolished property.
Oh, Margie.
Are there any financial considerations given to these developers if they do, in fact, move and preserve,
We don't have this community preservation to do it.
If we had community preservation.
If we did, the town could have an impact, but we don't have that, so it's all private. So as I suggested, we have to kind of encourage, or, look, do this, and you don't have to wait. And we've made that suggestion. There's a particular building in town where the 9-month demolition delay has expired, and we tried to convince at the beginning of the developer, look, how about doing this? How about including that in your project? And you can start tomorrow.
Well, I don't know how a community preservation act becomes an act. I mean, I've heard of it, I know what it is, so Why don't we have it?
We tried it. We tried to get voted
How
down.
long?
But every other town owns.
It
at
was
least
about
other
5
towns
years ago
do
the
what
last
they
time.
want.
Mr. Hurley carried a big flag in favor of that for a
That's
long time.
Maybe it might be accepted
It may, I think the town would, yeah.
It did.
Maybe,
again.
maybe.
That's what other towns have, is some of those towns that don't have the 24-month, have a community preservation act, which they can use. So in other words, they have a tool that they can use. We don't.
One more comment, one more question.
With the 9 months that it's currently at right now, have there been any community involvement with those? You said there was some meetings if you extended it to the 24. With the 9 months, have there been any meetings or community get involved and share interests?
The Swift Hat Shop, of course, yes, the community has been very involved. The other one, kind of the flip side, when we lost the Granite House, the corner of Reedsdale Road and Randolph Avenue, after the owner sat there for 9 months, refused to even allow the property to be shown to prospective buyers who were considering reusing the existing building, I was getting phone calls. How could you allow that to happen? Well, where were you during this whole thing?
That's right. So you said they've been calling you, well, they're meetings. that
Well,
would
they
take
did
place.
they did at that point. People drove by, the building was gone.
Right.
What the heck happened?
And the granite got carted off too, and not even
Yeah,
sold
it
for
did.
anything decent. Jean, did you have a question?
Well,
This is the
I
end.
was,
This is the last.
just as a counteraction to the developers coming in and dictating pretty much what Milton is gonna look like, this is one of the ways that we have to answer that.
It's one of the
Very,
few ways
very
we
Control
have.
it.
important. That's right, that's
One of the
right.
few ways.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For hope of your support.
Okay. Well, this was one of the ones that we were going to look at, this, the bicycle, and a couple of others, because what I would like to do is to vote on some of the more straightforward, yes, definitely.
I'll
more
make a
straightforward
motion.
ones now and leave the others for Monday.
I'll make a motion to accept the article as, or the recommendation as written.
Okay? Second. Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, great, that's easy.
Look, we can do something.
No, listen, I will
Everything
comment,
can
I
be
will comment, I made a
contentious.
comment earlier, and I'm not being self-congratulatory here, but I knew someone who actually watched our last meeting on Milton Cable, and commented at what an extraordinary discussion it was. I don't know what they're used to watching, and maybe they do need a life if that's what they're used to. But they were.
That's what I say, every time I hear something.
They were
They just turned the
complimentary.
channel, thank
They
you,
were
so-
complimentary of the level of discussion and discourse, that it exhausted the subject significantly. So again, congratulations. So it's not as if we're a rubber stamp. The next one that I thought we could talk about, if you, we're going, it's almost at random, but it isn't, because there's a reason here, is the amendment to Chapter 24. This is the construction noise amendment. This is relatively straightforward. It concerns noise between the hours of 7 and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, limitations thereof, and the limitations of permitted work versus non-permitted, et cetera. I'm assuming everybody has read it.
Yeah.
And if we have any discussion beforehand, we can have that now. Otherwise, the chair will entertain a motion to approve it. Gwen, go ahead.
Shall operate any mechanized vehicles.
Yep.
Operating a vehicle is generally driving a vehicle. Are we saying that no trucks can drive before 7 a.m.?
No.
Is that a term of art, operate? I was thinking
Operating.
more like a backhoe or something.
Yeah, I think that's the intent.
That's the intent.
So it's like a language
Well,
tweak.
with respect,
I'm
yeah, with
assuming?
respect to construction or maintenance activities on any lot in the town.
That may not
So
define
driving a truck
vehicles.
through the town would not be on a lot
Right, so
within
that
the
wouldn't be
town.
construed.
But all of that's a qualifier for mechanized vehicle, or operate
Yes.
any mechanized vehicle,
Right.
comma, including da-da-da-da-da.
That could be a large 10-wheeler truck, sure. I guess the way this is written, yes.
Being driven, yeah.
And, to be honest, I mean, some of the complaints that neighbors have is, you know, construction sites start up at, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Getting deliveries, and you'll have a huge tractor-trailer truck come in with a load of wood and boom.
But limiting the ability of driving trucks, you get into legal issues with whether you can actually.
Well, it's legal to drive a truck on any public road that's not marked.
So you're saying you want
Excluded.
to just have it, just
But
change the word
The way
to
that this
verbiage
reads,
on
it sounds like you can't drive a truck before 7 a.m.
So to
on
make it a little bit
weekdays.
more detailed, saying, operation.
define the word
I don't know
vehicle.
if that's the intent. If the intent is to say you're not allowed to drive trucks after 7 p.m., I doubt that's what they mean, but if that's not what they mean, then that probably needs to be clarified.
How would we handle this would we handle this in a way that we would recommend changing that language?
Does that word purposes of this article define vehicle?
Define vehicle or define operate?
Operate.
Just
Operate, just
recommend
the
approval
purposes
with
of this.
suggested
It's called
change.
construction noise. So, it's relevant to construction. So anything under this is purposed for construction.
Okay, I see that.
But Tom, we can't change, because he knows, we can't change this wording, doesn't even have to be changed by the, what is it, Joe Crevity's department?
No, you can't add anything to the article,
Right.
but you could certainly recommend to take away.
Okay.
That's still within the scope of the article.
Take away operate.
But
Clarify?
again, we up to the moderator, whether you're just clarifying or whether you're substantially changing the article. You can't substantially change it with a recommendation. But you can clarify it, you can diminish it, make it less, but you
Operate.
can't add to it.
Operate with the purpose of something that just elaborates a little bit more. I'm just throwing that out there. 'Cause
Yeah, I'm
operate
trying to
by
think,
itself-
like I said, I think part of the intent was, if a big 10-wheeler dump truck coming up a small residential street, that's gonna, dump a load of loom or something at 6 o'clock in the morning, was something that you're trying to get at with these things. But, and it's a good point. I don't know the answer to that question, it's a public road. I guess you can't.
But if it's specific to a lot, because that's what we're talking about here, shall operate any mechanized vehicles, including without limitation trucks, backhoes, bobcats, earth movers, or operate other mechanized equipment, including without limitation power saws, power tools, power washers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with respect to construction or maintenance activities on any lot. So it's silent on the terms of how the item gets there. So I think the intent is when it's on the lot.
Yeah.
I would construe it that way. That's how I would read it. In which case, I think operate is probably an okay word.
Just another, we still talking about that one? Go ahead.
We know what you think of that.
Bring up your point.
No, I'm a big believer in the weekends, so it has
I'm with you there.
Saturdays 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then Sunday,
Saturday 7 to 5, and then Sunday 10 to 3.
right, Saturday 7 a.m. to 5. I propose to do 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday. That's just how I feel about it, because a lot of people work very hard during the week, and then
Don't wanna be bothered with noise.
there are people that are still trying to catch up on sleep on the weekends, and it's a nice residential neighborhood. That's just my.
Okay. Chris?
The only reason I respect that, because I also like my weekends, but the only reason I would not do that is because the parenthetical in the first couple of lines says excluding the residents of residential premises on projects not requiring building permit on their lot and excluding the town. It's a little ambiguous whether "and" actually means "or" here, but let's assume that it does. If I have, there are times when I might need the town to come to my house to have a contractor do something where the time is limited during the week. So I think frankly having the extra hours on the weekend might be the only time that it gets done. So that's the only reason I would I would not want to
Would
limit
that
that
mean you
time.
can't have a lawn service come mow your lawn at 4 o'clock on a Saturday?
Well,
If
I've
they
had,
just couldn't get there in the morning because they have other customers.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
but I mean, it's up to 5 o'clock on Saturday, so.
Right.
Oh, is it?
Scott?
I would say changing times is a significant deviation from what's been presented as a
agree with
bylaw.
that.
This is gonna get debated to death on the
It
floor
will.
of town meeting. So,
Time is critical.
as long as the gist of this is correct and, you know, it's formatted correctly, there's no glaring omissions, I think we should, you know, I'd put a vote to, yeah,
Okay.
approve it as written and have town meeting debate the particulars.
So we have a proposal to accept it as written, recommended to the town meeting. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have discussion following.
Yeah, the only other question I had was, and the building permit part of it, is it requires or has a building? Because lots of people do things without building permits.
Oh, no.
what are you saying?
Oh, my God.
So I just wanted to make sure that it says requires a building permit, or,
10 to 5.
Well, so they talk about in the absence of an approved construction management plan, et cetera, so it's a distinction there.
It also makes the building commissioner responsible for enforcing these provisions.
Yeah.
oh, no, it
always
does
makes
say,
me
it does
wonder
say
about
requiring a
staff.
building permit on the other lot.
That's
So-
another question.
So I'm fine, it does say requiring a building permit. So
Okay.
if you didn't pull a building permit, but you should have,
Yeah.
then I guess you can get
That's on
shut
you,
down for
right.
doing your own.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Different reason.
Another layer.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion that's been made, seconded, discussion is ended. Do I have, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One opposed. Okay, that's recommended.
yourself clear on the record. That's what it's all about.
That's in my business that we say that's how they make markets. Okay. The next one is the bicycle parking. Let me see which one that is. So this is an interesting one.
Yeah, it is.
Is this one?
Okay, I'm having trouble finding my copy, but that doesn't mean we can't continue. Oh, thank you very much. Right now, we have the bicycle parking required, as you see here, for new buildings, et cetera, or renovated buildings. Anybody have anything they want to say about this? Does anybody have an opinion one way or another? Margie?
Well, in any district, any new building, so it's only applies to new buildings?
No,
No.
No.
Okay. More than one so if I have a two-story, I have to make provisions to have a bicycle area?
if you have a two-family and you,
Two-family rather,
and you
yes.
improve it more than 25% of its assessed value, you'd be required to have one. The same way that ADA compliances kick in.
Who's asking for this?
It's probably the bicycle committee, but I don't know who was it submitted by.
I think that's just a little bit overreaching. If you're in a private home, a two-family,
Well, it's 3 or more, actually, 3 or more residential units for the 25%.
I know.
But yeah, if you have a 3 unit, yeah.
It would
Maybe
require
I'm as a
someone.
private landowner, I don't want bicycles parked in my yard or in
They're
front of my
your
house.
tenants.
Isn't that my property right?
They're your tenants' bicycles, that's,
But maybe I don't, maybe my rules and regulations in my lease state that there should be no bicycles parked out front or within, and just like people can't park a car on the street. This is my own personal property, I live there. Maybe I want to make sure it looks clean and I don't want certain things outside or junk cars parked there. There are reasons, I just think it's overreaching.
well, first of all, it probably outside wouldn't be, it requires it to be covered in a convenient
Covered
location.
parking for number of bicycles.
Look at how small these lots are, postage stamps most people live on.
I think this is what the town meeting is gonna sound
Yeah.
like.
Yes.
You know, like for our purposes, is it gonna
Right.
increase cost to the
That's
town
true.
or
Yeah.
anything? It
I
might
mean, part of
discourage.
the thing is, it's a bicycle-friendly world. And
Only for apartment dwellers?
Well, in other words,
That's the weird part.
you're,
Right.
you know, if you own your own house, you find a place to put a
Yeah,
bike.
chances
You know,
are you're
if you
gonna keep a
don't,
nice
then
bike
it gets more
inside.
difficult.
I'm
right.
sure it would come up in town meeting, but the only question I would have is when it says require indoor parking, does that mean like a shed that you can put out in the back? Maybe
That's indoor.
does that count as indoor?
Yeah,
Maybe get a
there's
shed?
some clarification in terms of
I'm sure that would be.
what does convenient mean?
Yes,
You know,
inconvenient.
May
but
not even have garages.
So I think
Chris,
all of
did you
that
have
will
a
be
question?
hashed out in town meeting.
Yeah, I have a
There's
question.
Only
amendments.
here for,
So I agree with all the comments about this is all stuff for town meeting to sort out, but I do have one question, and that is the provisions about the planning board modifying the requirements for good cause. Does the planning board already has that authority to make such requirements in the ordinary course?
only with respect to special permits.
Right.
So if it doesn't require a special permit, then the planning board has no, you know, yeah.
Jurisdiction.
So what would be a good cause? Why would the planning board need to modify this? I'm just discussing.
for your point.
There is
of-
no room on the lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
right, right.
Okay, that's fine.
Any other commentaries?
Or it's an elderly housing project.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll have bicycles too.
But they might, they might want to. You're right. I mean, I'm elderly, so.
Yeah.
Do you have?
I dare say I like it. And I'll run to my car after the meeting.
No, it will be interesting
I
at
think-
town meeting in the floor.
Okay, if that is the case, the chair will entertain a motion to approve this as written
I
and
move to approve
recommend.
as written.
Second.
Any discussion further on this? All in favor?
Well, I have
Aye.
some, I
Any
have some.
opposed?
Sorry, you want to
I
discuss?
I just think this is,
I abstain.
Okay,
I mean, I think some accommodations should be made on public ways for bicyclists. I think that's a fantastic, you know, but I just think this is
overreaching?
legislating something that doesn't need to be legislated in a town zoning bylaw. That's my opinion on it. That's my.
Good point.
I second that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily
And,
disagree.
you know, if I was in town meeting and this came up, I would
Say no.
I would be upset that it took my time away from my family to go over something.
That will be up to them to talk about.
Great point.
Okay, next
We
is,
need to revote.
now we have to-
Because
well, we kind of took the vote.
Mine is no.
Yeah, we have. I wasn't sure. We haven't, I recorded, I have one.
He was making sure he
abstention,
finished
one
that.
negative.
I like to say two negative
Two
now
negatives.
after I heard
Okay.
that.
Fine, but it passes, the town meeting can wrestle with that one, and that's perfectly fine. The next one that I wanted to talk about is maintenance of buildings. Maintenance, to see if the town will vote to amend section 5 of zoning bylaws by adding a new subsection 1 entitled maintenance of buildings. Maintenance of buildings. In any zoning districts, all buildings shall be maintained in a structurally sound and safe condition by their owners or other responsible persons. So, we were talking a little bit about overreaching.
Well, I think the building commissioner already has.
Is this necessary?
Isn't there
Right.
building codes?
I mean, this is the question that I would ask. Is this something necessary? I thought that we already had oversight.
I mean, I would like to see it in context of
Yeah.
what the zoning section 5 bylaw is.
Right.
It just seems like a common good neighbor.
I think this is just at the end of the list, they added
That's
an
it.
I. Yeah, I don't have
This
the
was
zoning bylaws.
this was recommended by a citizen, I know that, but, and
Chris?
Well, I don't know if Tom said, well, I also think, I mean, this is just inviting an abusive enforcement or is otherwise totally unenforceable. It just seems like,
Yeah.
this to me seems like not something for town meeting to sort out. This to me seems like it's an unenforceable, and potentially dangerous thing to add.
yeah, I mean, I think everybody agrees that buildings should be safe and sound. I mean, that's like motherhood
building
never pie.
commissioner exists for that.
Yeah.
But I may be mistaken, but I think the building commissioner already has that right. He can condemn a building if it's not
When
safe
we
or sanitary.
Who did
remand
this?
for further study,
Yeah.
does that mean that it's not heard at the,
Why don't we just, if we could on Monday, just have the building commissioner
Yeah,
come
that would
in
make
and just confirm that?
Right.
Or just confirm it without him coming in, that,
Well, I'll ask Mike Dennehy to get him to give us an opinion about this, because Mike's
Yeah,
coming on
and
Monday.
then maybe, you know, if he
Yeah.
says, yeah, that this doesn't do anything, then we just
Yeah.
recommend no.
Okay.
Yeah, because this
Perhaps
seems more
even
of
Joe
enforcement
Preverty
more
Yeah.
than.
Maybe Joe
Doesn't tell
Preverty
him that he
can
has
write
to go
something
around
up
and check every building
give
to
to
make
us
sure
as
this
his
runs
reasoning
So
behind
the
it.
enforcement piece is the thing that I did look
He
at, like
didn't- yeah,
what
it's
happens
not
if
coming
you
from the
don't?
town,
Right.
it's coming
And
from
what
the
happens if you don't is there's
Coming
a
from a
potential they
resident.
could revoke your occupancy permit.
Right.
A
I don't
resident.
know
to
who,
live
but I
there.
know it's coming from a resident.
Which is a big deal. And then there's a $300 fine, but it doesn't specify, it says per occurrence.
Probably,
And
yes.
usually that's read to mean like each day of the occurrence. So it's very significant if
Okay.
it's an extended period of time.
I think the rest of them, there are six of us.
What about marijuana?
Do we want to bring that up at
During
5
the
minutes to
meeting,
9?
Tom?
I didn't think so. I thought we could adjourn and discuss. We have 6 remaining. We'll have Mike Dennehy here. The planning board is coming, and we can ask them some questions as well on Monday at 7. So I think we can get through the other articles pretty quickly. I think we made remarkable progress. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I will ask you, though, over the weekend, if you have time, to look at the articles and to make any concise questions that you might have, so that when we get them in front of us, we can get through it and move along, because I genuinely appreciate your time, and I'm jealous of protecting yours as well. Very good. So the chairman
Motion
will
to
check-
adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. See you Monday. Thank you all very much. Good work.